Welcome to the Power of Transformation with Dr. BEGO, where faith meets declaration and purpose ignites breakthrough. Each episode empowers you to speak life, renew your mind, and walk boldly in who God says you are. Your transformation starts now. Well, good day, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Power of Transformation. I'm Dr. BEGO, and today we're going to be dealing with daily declarations for trusting in generosity. Before we get started, a couple of things I want to invite you to do. Make sure that you like, share, and subscribe at all social media platforms at Dr. BEGO Transform. Be sure to pick up a copy of my latest book, The 8 Declarations to Speak Over Your Life, everywhere where books are sold and on my website, drbegotransform.com. We are dealing with the subject matter of generosity. We have discussed how culture begins to shape our perspective, not just in positive ways, but also in negative ways, and how we must have an infusion of a new identity, a new trust and belief system if we're going to change, to transform how we view our relationship with life. We also learned about being dependent upon God, that all that we have, all that we hope to be, all that you want to amount to in this world comes not from your own ambition, but in your dependency, your relationship with God. So today we're going to go just a bit further, because the question becomes that we all have to answer, that it's asked to us each and every day, is that can I trust God enough to give generously? Is your life built in such a way that you can take all that you have, give it away, and know that God will return it to you? We're not just talking about in terms of being emotionally generous or verbally generous, but we're also talking about in a very financial, in a very practical. We're talking about how does it mean to live a life where you are consistently being generous, because generosity reveals something deeper than just money. Generosity, it shows up something greater than your financial contribution. Generosity shows us, it helps us understand that the source of our giving is not dependent or predicated on us and what we have. That the source of our giving is dependent upon our relationship with God. So why is it generosity? Why is it so difficult for so many people? Can we be honest for a moment? Because generosity sounds good in theory, but it's difficult to practice. Because generosity confronts the fear that is living inside of you. That in order for you to be generous, you must assess what it is that you have and what it is that you do not have. And so generosity has a way of bringing up this fear of you may not have enough, this fear that you may not have enough left over, this fear that giving means that you are losing control, or that somehow you're going to run out if you share it. You live in this circumstance of fear that if you release what you have, then you would not recover it at the same amount. And for many people, those fears are not abstract, right? They're not something, some pie in the sky. They're not something that we thought of. No, they are based upon our real lived experiences. Because some people know what it means to go through seasons of lack. Some of you know what it means to have bills pile up at the beginning of the month, knowing that you ran out of money the ending of last month. Some of you know what it means to carry family members who are always coming to you when they need a loan or a handout. You know what it means to stretch the dollar to try to make it make sense. So it's not abstract. This issue, this war, this circumstance around generosity and spear is real. You have lived it, you have experienced it, and it's time for us on this day to develop a plan to overcome it. Because you are tired of sick and tired. You are tired of living in the area of your life of scarcity. You are tired of living in moments of scarcity. You are tired of experiencing scarcity, and you're really in a position now where you want to live more. So how do you get there? Because when people hear to be generous, sometimes what they really hear is be vulnerable. That when you hear people say give, you interpret that to mean take the risk. When you hear people say it's time for you to give more, what you hear is to let go of what you have worked so hard to accumulate. This is why generosity is not just about money. You want to know what generosity is about? Generosity is about trust. And if culture has trained you to believe that survival depends on how you hold out and how you hold tight, the generosity will always seem dangerous to you. So you must learn to be more trusting, because the kingdom teaches us something different. The kingdom teaches us that open hands are your ability to be open to trust. So what exactly does generosity really mean in the kingdom? Let's define what it does not mean first. Generosity is not being reckless. Generosity is not being under pressure. Generosity is not giving to impress people. Generosity is not living beyond your means. Generosity is not responding into manipulation. Generosity is not being pressured into doing something that you cannot afford to do. If I can make it plain, generosity is not you picking up the tab every time you go out to eat. Generosity is not always you filling up the gas tank. Generosity is not you living beyond your means. No, biblical generosity is this free, intentional release of resources from the heart that trusts God. Generosity is this free, intentional release of resources from a heart that trusts God. Let me say it one more time. What is generosity? It is this free, intentional release of the resources from the heart that trusts God. In other words, generosity says, God has been good to me, better to me than I've been to myself. I like the saints of old. They say you can't beat God's giving, no matter how hard you try. That the more you give, the more that God gives to you. Generosity says what I have is not just for me. Generosity says I can release without fear because my source will never dry up. You see, generosity in the kingdom is rooted in three things. The first thing the generosity is rooted in is gratitude. You must begin to develop an appreciation for whatever it is that you have in this season. It is not a comparison based upon what other people have. It is not a comparison about what you used to have. No, generosity is this gratitude that says you are grateful. You are thankful for whatever it is that God has entrusted for you, to you, with you, through you in this season. You may not have the job that you want, may not live where you want to live, may not drive the car, may not have the clothes, may not be able to eat the steak, the filet mignon, whatever it is. But guess what? You learn to be grateful in this season because you are remembering what God has done. Can I tell you something? That if God did it before, then God can do it again. You have to learn to be appreciative of whatever it is that God is doing in you, with you, through you, by you, because of you in this season. So the first one is gratitude. The second is stewardship, because stewardship is directly tied to our giving. The giving of your time, the giving of your treasure, the giving of your resources, the giving of your talents. And so you ought not to give randomly. In other words, every request should not be met with a yes. Every ask should not be met with a yes. But as a good steward, you have to give an account for what God has given to you. As a good steward, you have to measure the return on the investment that you're getting ready to give out. So you just don't give freely just because you have it. You don't just give randomly and say God's going to give it back to you. No, being a good steward means that you are giving prayerfully. It means that you are giving intentionally. It means that you are giving wisely, because you will be held accountable for everything that comes into your hand and everything that goes out. So the first one is to be grateful, practice gratitude. The second is stewardship, learn how to manage what it is that you have. And the third thing that gratitude and generosity is rooted in as it relates to the kingdom is trust. You must come to the place of believing that obedience will never bankrupt you. Can I say that again? That your obedience to God will never put you in a position where you are lack, where you are the last, where you are the least. That obedience to God repositions you, not that you become bankrupt, but that you may be blessed. But you have to trust. You have to begin to trust what God is speaking in your life, because this means that God's provision is not just for your comfort. You are trusting God not to have you in a place of ease. You're trusting God is not that you can just breathe a sigh of relief. You trusting God is not just about comfort. You trusting God is also about capacity. It is about you saying, God, you have entrusted me with this, and I have been a good steward, and I am grateful for what you have given to me, and now I believe that I can handle more. I believe that if you look at what you have given, that it has been a good return on your investment. If you look at the family, I've trained them, I have raised them. It's a good turn on your investment. If you look at the marriage, you have lived and you have worked and you have worshiped, you have studied, you have grown together. That is a good return on the investment. If you look at your children, the way that they live, and they are beginning to model a lifestyle, that they are beginning to be influencers in the life of their siblings and their friends, that they are praying and talking about Jesus, that's a return on an investment. So trusting God is not just about living in this moment of comfort. Trusting God is about saying, Lord, I have capacity now. You can trust me more. And so generosity is the one of the ways that God flows through a yielded life. That there is a return on what God has deposited within you. That when you sow your seeds, when you give generously, that you are not just giving and sowing and walking away. No, that you are monitoring, that you are questioning, that you are watching how the seed is growing. You are watching, you are a part of something. But when you give to it, you are now a part of it, and now you want to ensure that your investment is secure. So you have to trust God. But scarcity has a way of changing our thinking around generosity. Because scarcity thinking always whispers a counter narrative. Scarcity always whispers something different into your ear. Scarcity says you won't have enough. Scarcity says you don't have enough to give. You don't have enough to save. You don't have enough to recover. You don't have enough to live. And when scarcity begins to dominate your thinking, generosity begins to feel like you are being irresponsible. Scarcity is not always about the amount that's in your hands. Sometimes it's about the mindset that you have. What do you do with whatever it is that you have? How do you appreciate? How do you sow? How do you give? How do you nurture? How do you save? How do you invest? Whatever it is that is in your hand. You say a person can live and have little and still trust God. And another person can have a whole lot and not be worth anything. Because scarcity thinking sounds like this: I have to hold on to everything. Scarcity thinking sounds like this: I can't let anything go. Scarcity thinking says if I help someone else, I'll hurt myself. Scarcity thinking says this may be the last time I have this amount of money. Now let's be wise. Let's take a step back. Because trusting generosity does not mean that you ignore your responsibility. That doesn't mean that you give away your rent money. It doesn't mean that you don't pay your car note. It doesn't mean that you tap into your savings when you know that there is a goal that you've set for that amount. Scarcity will have you believing that you don't have enough. But it does not mean that you live without strategy. That there's always purpose around your giving. That you don't just give for the sake of giving. That you are giving with intentionality. That you are giving because there is a purpose. There is a promise that is attached to your giving. And so generosity says this in the mind: Lord, what do you want me to release? It says that you can be faithful with what's in your hand. You begin to ask the question: how can you live open without living foolishly? That generosity does not start with your organization or your religious affiliation. The generosity does not begin with your leadership. Generosity begins with your relationship with God, because it does not belong to you anyhow. Therefore, you must ask permission. Permission to give. Permission to be generous. Permission to release what's in your hand and give it to someplace else. That's the opposite of scarcity, because scarcity will cause you to tighten what's in your hand. But faith opens what fear tries to close. But your faith is based upon your level of intimacy with God. Because scarcity is in one ear and God needs to be in the other. And the voice of God must be greater than the voice of scarcity. The voice of God must be greater than any voice of manipulation. The voice of God must be greater than any purpose outside of God's plan for your life. So I want us to write down a couple of things, because there are some practical daily ways in which you can begin to develop a generous trust. Number one, thank God for what you already have. And I think we mentioned this already, but it's worth repeating again. Thank God for what you already have. Because when you are grateful, when you practice gratitude, it begins to soften the grip of fear in your life. Number two, decide before emotions take over. In other words, generosity works best when it's intentional, not when it's emotional driven, not when it's emotional led, not when someone is pulling on your heart in order to give. Number three, start small but stay consistent. That if you hear the voice of God telling you to give, to be generous in your giving, that there is purpose in your giving, then the expectation is that you give. Now, the challenge is in what to give, or how much to give, or how regularly you are to give. What I want to instruct you to do is give. Start off with the small things. Start off with the small amount. Trust God with the small area in your life. And over time, that begins to breed consistency. And when you become consistent in your giving, you will see how you can do much more with what you had, because your perspective begins to shift. Here's the last thing. Give without performance. Don't give for the applause. Don't give for the recognition. Don't give for the attention. Don't give for the image. Give because it is an act of worship. You know, whenever we worship, we must be willing to go to God authentic, genuine, naked, not clothed, not in secret, but open. So it is in our giving, that when you give because it is an act of worship. That you're actually saying, God, I am giving back to you what you have already given to me. I give myself to you. I give my mind to you. I give my heart to you. I give my family to you. I give my relationships to you. I give my business to you. I give my finances to you. I give it back to you. And when you do that, you will begin to see how your conversation begins to shift. You begin to speak generously each and every day, because generosity begins to overcome and overtake the fear that you have been living and speaking each and every day. What does that sound like? That you will live in the moment of your existence by recognizing that God is your source, Every day you begin to say to yourself that you are not living in fear or panic, that each and every day you begin to release the trust and not begin to succumb to the pressures of this world or this environment. You begin to recognize that generosity does not diminish you. The generosity begins to teach you discipline. So here's a daily declaration. I want you to repeat after me. I want you to say it slowly. I want you to say it with faith. And I want you to say it until your heart begins to agree with these words. Are you ready? Let's say it. I declare that God is my source, and I do not live in fear or lack. I declare that I trust God to provide for me all the time and in all things. I declare that my heart is open, that my hands are willing, and my life is disciplined by wisdom. I declare that I reject scarcity, that I reject anxiety, and I reject selfishly. I declare that I walk in gratitude, that I walk in stewardship, that I walk in generosity. I declare that God blesses me so that I can be a blessing to those who are around me. Now let's surmise this into one declaration. Are you ready? Repeat after me. I declare I trust God enough to live generously. Let's say that again. I declare that I trust God enough to live generously. Listen, generosity is not about what you leave in your hand. Generosity is about what is happening in your heart. And every time that you trust God enough to release, can I tell you what happens? You weaken fear. Every time you trust God to release what's in your hand, you strengthen your faith. Every time you trust God enough to release what's in your hand, you deepen your dependency on God. Every time you trust God to release what's in your hand, you remind yourself that your source is not in your supply, that your source is in God, that you do not have to live tight, you do not have to live tense, and you do not have to live afraid. You can live open, you can live in freedom, you can live in wisdom, and you can live in peace. And as you grow in this degree of generosity, hear me, you will discover something beautiful. When you live in this degree of generosity, here's what you will learn. You will learn just how faithful God is. Not only with what you hold on to, but because of how you begin to obey God, trust God, believe in God, and depend on God. Until next time, may God bless you. May the Lord keep you, and may heaven continue to smile upon you. Peace. Thank you for tuning in to The Power of Transformation. If today's episode blessed you, share it with someone you love. Don't forget to subscribe and stay connected for more tools to declare, believe, and become. Until next time, keep speaking life.